Hi everyone and welcome to my presentation called ManoMano's Red Team Operation from a click to remote code execution. So basically this is a presentation coming from an article that I wrote on ManoMano's Medium page called The Tale of a Click Leading to RCE. And basically ManoMano is the European leader in tooling, gathering and housing online. We're e-commerce marketplace selling all those brilliant stuff. And to present myself, my name is Roni Carta. You also may know me as Lupin on the internet. I'm a senior security engineer at ManoMano. I'm also co-leading ManoMano's bug bounty program on HackerOne, and I've been doing bug bounties for at least now 2 years and a half, and I love it, right? And my job at ManoMano, like bug bounty hunting, is to try to identify vulnerabilities within our components and then help the teams into fixing them and having a better security overall. And so at the security team, we have like three values, if we can say so. The first one is always think like an attacker. Each time that we'll deploy a new project or something, we will think like how an attacker can try to exploit it, right? And then we also put the human first, which means that we are always going to try to help our employees and collaborators into having the best security possible by following the best practices, for instance. But also it's super tied with our attacker mindset, because we are always going to try to trap them with social engineering attacks and red team operations. And also, we try to have a strong hacker culture internally by spreading the good word about offensive security, but also externally by having a bug bounty program. Okay, so let's start this story. This starts with an afternoon where I was doing reconnaissance on our internal assets, so under the ManoMano's VPN, and I run a tool called domains. Basically, domains will fetch all the subdomains that we have from AWS Route 53. And then I simply piped it into a tool called HTTPX, which is provided by Project Discovery. It's open source. And I put arguments like, hey, if you check if the subdomains has an HTTP web server. Can you also check the technologies running on this web server, and also give me the title, which helps a lot for me in my reconnaissance methodology, right? And so when I checked the data that I received from HTTPX, I saw a page that I really never tested before, which was a web page test. It was a private instance running under ManoMano's VPN. And so web page test was quite interesting for me, because you could provide a website just by giving a link, and it will run the website, the JavaScript on it, the images, etc., and then give you an analysis and a performance review of the website. And under analysis, also web page test was giving you screenshot, and the page was unauthenticated, which means that every employees of ManoMano could access this endpoint. And so when you have all those informations about how web page test is working, there is one vulnerability that you may already think of as an offensive security researcher, which is, of course, server-side request forgery. So for those who don't know, server-side request forgery, also called SSRF, is a vulnerability where an attacker can arbitrarily say to the backend, "Hey, can you do a request to that website?" And then, if it's a full read SSRF, it can actually see the response, and that's actually really, really useful, because the thing is, you could actually exfiltrate confidential information on the adjacent host of the machine that you are forcing to make requests, and so that's really interesting if there is some confidential stuff that is running on the target's network. And something really interesting about WebPageTest, as I said, we are running on AWS, and so WebPageTest was running on an EC2 instance, and it's super interesting when you got SSRF on an AWS instance, because there is an endpoint called a metadata endpoint where you can actually fetch confidential information about the host, and there is only the EC2 instance that can call this IP with a HTTP GET request. And so there is, for instance, the security credential of the machine on this endpoint. So it's really interesting if you can actually read those. And so when I provided the endpoint IP to WebPageTest, I got blocked, and it told me, hey, this IP is actually blocked, right? And so what I did is that I checked WebPageTest source code, which is open source, and I saw that they were using a PHP function called string compare. And so I went to check the documentation of this function. Actually, string compare is actually a simple comparison between two string, and it's actually case sensitive. And so basically they were doing the string compare on the input that I was providing, right? So I could, for instance, get a subdomain pointing to the AWS metadata IP. And for instance, there is a project discovery that got a tool called Interact SH, and one of the subdomain of Interact is actually pointing to the AWS metadata. So it's super useful. And I just simply provided this subdomain while trying to fetch the security credentials, and I got the credential, right? So I managed to bypass the string compare function, and it was quite easy. So that was a great success, right? But the thing is, as I said earlier, you need to be connected under ManoMano's VPN, so only employees can access this endpoint and actually get the credential of this machine. And so in order to understand what we did next, you need to understand what is the same origin policy, the SOP. Basically, the SOP is a policy happening on the client side, basically on the browser realm, telling you, hey, if you want to send a JavaScript HTTP request to another website, you cannot actually see the response because let's face it, it will be a huge security risk. For instance, if your website could ping, I don't know, Gmail on your behalf and see all the data that is belonging to you. And there is something called the CORS, the cross-origin resource sharing, which basically says that, hey, if this website wants to do a call, a JavaScript call to my website, I allow it to fetch resources, but the other websites, I'm not allowing it. So basically, it's some kind of whitelisting of which website can fetch resources from one origin. And so this is actually the backend server that is going to set up an header called the access control allow origin, which authorize a set of websites to fetch resources while doing, for instance, an XML HTTP request. And there is also another header called the access control allow credentials, which says that if you actually if you try to fetch the resources, you can do so by also giving your cookie and, for instance, your session cookie, and fetch authenticated resources. And so what's happening, for instance, when website A wants to contact website B, that is whitelisting website A, for instance, the browser will simply say, okay, I'm allowing that request. And so the goal was to find a misconfiguration in the CORS. And when I went to my burper proxy to see all the logs related to the instance page, I saw that the runtest.php file, which runs the scan, which starts the scan with a post request, was actually vulnerable to a CORS bypass, because the access control allow origin was wildcarded, which means that any website could make a request on the behalf of a user in order to start a scan. Right, so that was like super interesting for us, and the goal is to start the scan on the, for instance, ManoMano's employee behalf, and then to fetch the images, the screenshot, in order to get the credentials. But the thing is, when I did a call request on the screenshot file, there was no course policy set, and so it was not vulnerable. I couldn't fetch the screenshot, just only start a scan. And so I tried to dig a bit deeper into what I could fetch, and I found a thumbnail.php file where it was actually, when you were running the analysis and it was printing the analysis on the page, there was a thumbnail that you click on it and then you could see the file. And so the thumbnail was actually vulnerable to the access control allow origin, and so you could actually fetch the thumbnail to get the screenshot file. So it was super interesting. And so the exploit chain is quite easy now. There is one ManoMano employee that visit my malicious page connected to the VPN. I send an XML HTTP request in order to start a scan on web page test. And then when the scan is over, I ping the thumbnail.php file again on ManoMano's employees' behalf in order to get the screenshot, and then I'm just exfiltrating the screenshot to the attacker's server. And like that, we got the credentials. Our proof of concept actually worked, and we got a low resolution screenshot because the thumbnail was resizing the image. It was not exactly the same file, and it was barely readable, but we managed to exfiltrate the credentials. So yay! But the thing is, the credential didn't have any permission, so we couldn't even connect to the machine with that, and so it was super sad. And when I told my manager, he joked about it first, but then he told me, okay, I'm sure if you manage to do that, you can get deeper into that instance, and I want you to try to pwn it. And so he motivated me. I got back on the horse, and now the objective was different. He wanted for me to find a vulnerability that we like to call the royal with cheese, which is basically a remote code execution. The goal was to try to find an RCE on the website and basically taking control of the web page test instance. Ooh, that's interesting. There is a lot of stake here. And so what I did is that I've set up a listener listening for every HTTP call. And then I started a scan while pointing to my listener, and I checked the request that was being made to my listener. And so I checked that the user agent was not like some kind of a custom user agent. It was actually a Chrome user agent. And then I remembered, the page is running JavaScript. So there is some kind of headless Chrome that is going to call my page. And when I checked the version of the user agent, it was 86.0. something. And this is highly out of date now. And so when there is a user agent running JavaScript that is outdated, in general, that smells super nice. And so I went digging into the CVEs where Chromium was vulnerable, and I found that prior to version 87.0.42, it was vulnerable to a heap corruption, basically where you corrupt one part of the memory, and there was a proof of concept on GitHub, which was amazing. I felt super lucky that day. And so when analyzing the proof of concept, I saw that at line 125 of this exploit, there was a shellcode. And I've never seen a shellcode written that way before. And so I figured out that actually it was a Unit32 array, and actually in the proof of concept repository there was a way to convert x64 shellcode into a Unit32 array in order to use it for the exploit. So everything I did was to run MSF Venom, that is a tool from offensive security, in order to generate a shellcode. For my proof of concept, I just wanted to run the ID command, and then I converted it to the Uint32 array, and I ran the exploit on a custom Docker image, running the headless Chrome, and it worked. I actually got the ID. And yeah, I was super happy about that. that was great. First time I was exploiting browser stuff. So that was cool. And so now the exploit chain is completely different. So basically now an attacker can send a link to an employee under the VPN that will open the link on its browser, start a scan on web page test, because we have some kind of cross-site request forgery, so we can start a scan on the user behalf, and then the scan will open a reverse shell to Chrome CVE's heap corruption, and then we can open just the reverse shell to the attacker's server, and now the attacker can just simply run arbitrary commands, and so yeah, that was super exciting to test. And you know, at that moment we had a valid vulnerability, right? We could have just reported it to the teams and fix it as soon as possible. But the thing is, we like to really go all the way at ManoMano, and when we have the opportunity to exploit a vulnerability using social engineering, we are going to take that opportunity. And so we had a plan of action. Basically, we were going to send a link to one employee with the VPN. They were going to start a scan on web page test without them knowing, and then they will be redirected to one of ManoMano's blog. And so the thing is, we had to ensure that if they click on the link, they were clicking with the VPN on. And so what we did is that we actually checked from the backend the IP that it was coming from, and so if the IP was the ManoMano's VPN, we were exploiting the web page test instance. But otherwise, we were saying, hey, there is a 403 error. Please activate the VPN. And so that was just a way for us to ensure that if an employee was to click on the link, and he was curious to check what was behind that link, he would actually open the VPN connection. Hey, this is Roni from the future editing this video. I forgot to tell you that actually this VPN error page was based on a 500 page that you can find at ManoMano. And actually the hardest part of the whole red team operation was to trigger a 500 error on ManoMano marketplace in order for us to copy the template. And then we set up GoFish, which is an open source phishing toolkit, in order to create a phishing campaign. And then we set up the GoFish with Mailgun in order to send emails to a set of ManoMano's employees. For phishing, we actually bought the domain people-manomano.com. Basically, our domain name is manomano.com, and so we added the dash in order to, you know, phishing, like phishing 101 trick, I guess. And then we were sending the email from no reply at people-manomano.com, and the phishing was redirecting to something redirect.people-manomano.com. On our listener, we opened an OpenSSL listener because we wanted to get a reverse shell to secure traffic. And then on the web page instance, our shellcode was running an OpenSSL connection opening to our server listening for incoming connections. Ooh, that's interesting, right? The plan for us, like the scenario was to actually impersonate our internal people team and to say, hey, there is a referral program where you could actually refer other people to come to ManoMano, and you are going to get paid for that. That's actually a real referral program that we have internally, and all those information could have been found online by a malicious actor. And so the social engineering was an email saying, hey, have you ever thought that we are spending too much time recruiting people that you already know? With our brand new referral program, we are going to recruit faster at lower cost, people fitting our values. But here's the twist. You can get paid for that. We plan to recruit up to 1,000 people over the next 18 months. We need you. Are you ready for this challenge? And so that's the goal was to sparkle the curiosity for the employees and to just, okay, that's a cool referral program. Just click on that link. And so we were so eager for them to click on this link. And yeah, so we sent this phishing to 15 employees. We didn't want to do a phishing on all of our employees for the simple reason that we were only exploiting one web page test instance. And so we needed one click in order to get a remote code execution. And so, yeah, that moment we waited like for about 30 minutes before getting a reverse shell. And we managed to compromise the server, and yeah, we could run arbitrary command on the server, and that was a really great experience. Actually, we got 5 reverse shell opening out of 15 person, and one employee reported the phishing attempt on the Slack channel to our security team, saying, "Hey, it smells weird," right? And so for us, it was a great success as a red team operation. We did all that work for about I will say it was 2 weeks of preparation, and with getting all the authorization to do so, and setting all the server, between finding the exploit and then doing the red team operation, there was like 1 or 2 months. And so it was super nice to do so. And it was the first time that I exploited a vulnerability using a browser to get a remote code execution. So it was so exciting for me. Thanks a lot for attending this presentation. I hope you liked it. If you have any feedback, do not hesitate to contact me on Twitter or Discord, and I hope you'll have an amazing day. Bye.